Hello, and welcome to the Key podcast from Inside Higher Ed. I'm Colleen Flaherty, editor of special content here at Inside Higher Ed. Thanks for listening in. Like many of you, my colleagues and I have been thinking hard over the last few years about how artificial intelligence is impacting various areas of higher education. We've written a lot about teaching and learning, for example. We've written less about AI and admissions and enrollment management, even though these two are highly consequential areas for both students and institutions, with enrollment management teams working to attract, admit, matriculate, and retain students. And the enrollment landscape is dynamic, to say the least. In the last couple weeks alone, Inside Higher Ed has run numerous articles that attempt to track the varied and at times conflicting indicators and trends. With 18-year-old college freshman enrollment dropping a significant 5% this year, 6-year college completion rates improving, and dual enrollment catching on at 4-year institutions. Those are just a few examples. And the background for all of this is the looming enrollment cliff. There are updated projections for that we also wrote about, by the way, along with relatively high enrollment management and admissions personnel turnover, plus other longer-term concerns for the field. So, in short, enrollment management is in the thick of it, and it really did seem time to look at how AI is impacting the field. Enter Beyond the Hype, Understanding and Unlocking AI's Potential in Enrollment Management. That's the special report Inside Higher Ed published this fall with support from Liaison. It's available on our website, and I do encourage you to check it out in full if you're interested in these issues. I'm also happy to say that today's episode of The Key draws on a recent expert panel we convened over Zoom with IHE readers in attendance about AI and enrollment management. I was lucky to be able to speak during the panel with journalist Ben Upton, who wrote Beyond the Hype for us, along with Joe Paris, Dean of Graduate and Professional Studies at Delaware Valley University, Naranda C. Wright, President of NAGAP at the Association for Graduate Enrollment Management and Associate Dean of the Jack N. Averett College of Graduate Studies at Georgia Southern University, and with Claire Brady, President of Glass Half Full Consulting, who's working with a lot of institutions on their AI initiatives. Ben interviewed both Joe and Claire for his report, which served as the jumping off point for the conversation you're about to hear. So for some context, I'll share a little about the report now. It does not present AI as a panacea to all the challenges I've just mentioned surrounding enrollment management. It does offer a helpful overview as to how AI is already existing and can potentially help further within enrollment management, along with related concerns and considerations. And the main takeaway for me is that there's certainly untapped potential here. According to Inside Higher Ed's annual survey of college and university campus chief technology officers with Hanover Research, for example, just about 17% of institutions represented are using AI in their admissions processes. And in the 2024 EDUCAUSE Analytics Landscape Study, respondents said boosting enrollments is a top motivator for strategic efforts toward analytics. But just a quarter said that their institution is using AI tools to support analytics. At the same time, enrollment management is in many ways, prime for AI. Experts note that enrollment managers have access to enormous amounts of data because of the nature of their work, and that AI is a tool that could help enrollment managers make better use of that proverbial enrollment funnel data in ways that benefit teams, students, and institutions. The report walks readers through predictive versus generative AI and current, emerging, and potential future use cases for each in enrollment management. One common first use case for AI in enrollment management is chatbots, due to their availability and user-friendliness. Student-facing bots are increasingly tailored to specific communities and enrollment stage, for example. But some of the most powerful applications of AI come later in the enrollment process, at stages that necessitate vast amounts of data, like finding that sweet spot in tuition discounting. And all of this has implications for data readiness. Looking ahead, experts frame much of what I've already mentioned as baby steps toward a more radical integration of AI. Joe, for example, says that AI could help institutions tap underserved learners, such as the 40 or so million who have some college but no credential, via models that can help predict the propensity for these adults to come back and finish their degree. Streamlining transfer is another possibility, an important one, among others mentioned. And crucially, based on Ben's reporting, Beyond the Hype also includes recommendations for enrollment management teams looking to integrate AI and build AI literacy, starting with communication to build awareness and gauge uptake. It also flags potential risks for teams to consider, such as algorithmic bias and those related to privacy, and it underscores the importance of properly vetting vendors. I'll queue up the panel conversation now. I hope it helps you and your teams better navigate these very interesting times.
Liaison is a higher education technology company that helps over 1,200 campuses achieve enrollment and student success goals. Its solutions include the centralized application service, AI tools, enrollment marketing, and advanced CRM and analytics. By offering innovative, data-driven products, Liaison empowers colleges and universities to build ideal student cohorts and meet their enrollment targets. Liaison, connecting ambition to achievement.
So now I'd like to welcome you all again for the panel conversation where we can flesh some of these ideas out. And I wanted to start with Ben, who very helpfully and masterfully, if I might say, wrote the report for us. So Ben, you talked to a lot of people for this report, and I'm wondering what you hope that enrollment management teams really take away from it.
For me, there's kind of two big takeaways. One is that getting ready to use AI in enrollment management is a really big project. It needs input from teams across the institution. As you said, you need buy-in from senior leadership. Everyone needs to know why all the work on data readiness and policy development is worth their time. So that's partly, a communication issue, partly a listening exercise that allows everyone to kind of shape the journey and the final destination. The other one is that the process can start very small and very informally. It could be as simple as, staff and faculty who are interested in AI meeting in their lunch breaks. It could be a channel on your intranet where people can share the projects they're working on. So it's a journey of 1,000 miles, but the first step can really be quite modest.
Okay. And anything else to add here about the reporting? Maybe considerations, questions, concerns, additional steps for building team buy-in and literacy?
Well, I mean, one thing that jumped out of the report for me, and obviously it's quite a practical piece, but some of the forward-looking aspects were quite exciting. Andrew Hanna, who I spoke to, described a kind of AI guidance counselor that could be built using the same data as recruitment and retention models. And this kind of counselor could be put into the hands of students who don't know what classes or extracurriculars they should take to get them into a specific career. And the same model could also look at courses a student has taken and give them examples of careers and roles that they might never have heard of. So it's a little outside enrollment management, but I think it really shows the value of investing time and effort to build these models, and that can pay off in surprising ways.
Mm-hmm. I like that. And I'm glad you highlighted it, because something that we hear about sometimes in our student success work at Inside Higher Ed, which is big for us, is that institutions, and I touched on a little bit on the intro, is that and you touched on it in your report, is that institutions gather so much information about students before they ever actually matriculate. And how can that information potentially be helpful when students do in fact matriculate and contribute to student success efforts like you describe? And maybe AI is one tool for putting that information to better use. So I wanted to bring in Naranda now. So AI is seen as a solution to problems that have long existed within enrollment management in certain ways, as a sort of, introed. And so I'm wondering, what are the top challenges for enrollment management teams in 2024, including in the graduate admission space?
Yeah, when I think about this, some of the top challenges in enrollment management, probably one of the biggest things that pops up to me first is meeting the needs of our students holistically. Knowing what those needs are, how we use those needs to attract our students, get them to enroll, retain, and graduate, and just process them through that enrollment funnel that we all hear about. Every applicant is not a good fit for our institutions or for our campuses. Not every institution or campus is a good fit for our students. So thinking about that, being able to effectively market our institutions and our programs on our campuses to prospective students, looking at our admissions requirements, thinking about those, the admission requirements, the admission process overall, is that a hindrance to prospective students that we're trying to get on our campuses? Also, is the application process easy to navigate? Can the student easily find an application, how to get to the application on our websites? And then probably one of the biggest things that I think across all of our campuses is being properly staffed, are some of the things that come to mind when I think about that question.
Mm-hmm. Right. Could you tell me a little bit more maybe about staffing? Because we do have some data points in the report about, and I think again, sort of alluded to them about how this is a space that has relatively high turnover.
Mhm. Yeah, it is. When you think about staffing, times change, technology changes, and a lot of times we have staff that have been at our institutions for a long time. And you think about, all right, things have to change. You can't do, you hear a lot of times, or this is how we've always done it on our campuses. And this is my piece of cheese. You can't move my cheese. This is what I want to do, how I want to do it. And when you think about with our staffing, a lot of times you have to think back and realize, is this the person for this position? That is this really what you want to do? We have to I guess I call it reassessing. Is this what I want to do? Is this where my passion lies? And a lot of times that with our faculty, students, and our staff on our campuses, it's like, this might not be a good fit for me and it's time for me to move on. But you also have to think about when you're in that hiring process, bringing someone on that's fresh, that has new ideas. And it could be someone that's never been in higher education. That could be the best hire for you. So realizing that properly staffing your office and taking an assessment of your office duties and responsibilities, and if you need to move that around, being able to do that.
Yeah. Well, I love the cheese analogy as someone who loves cheese. And so it's interesting when you mentioned staffing before, I was thinking about how AI could potentially help there with automating processes. But then some of what you described seems a little bit like an inertia problem and a status quo type problem. And I can see how AI is potentially then an opportunity to come in and sort of disrupt processes and potentially improve them. So I was wondering, could you talk a little bit more about how you see AI helping with some of the issues that you led with? And then also, crucially, at the same time, what should enrollment management teams be aware of or concerned about when looking to AI as a solution?
Yeah, I think when AI was kind of like a hot topic and coming on the scene, it was like everybody thought about the negative impacts of AI and thinking about it taking away from our jobs and what we do. But when I view it and the more I get to know about it, I think it's a tool that can enhance our processes. I think one of the biggest things is work smarter, not harder. So using these tools to assess our processes, our assessment of our services, how we provide our services on our campus, helping us build those communication plans and recruitment plans and things like that. So using it to enhance what we do on our campuses, but AI can help us look at that from a different perspective or within a different lens, and just putting in our information. It's like, all right, how can we enhance this? How can we make this better, more appealing to prospective students, our students that we serve on our campuses, so that what we're doing, we can be more efficient and provide smoother processes for our students. One of the you shared one of the quotes that I wrote down from Claire on here, where it talked about AI has immense potential to transform the way we plan and the way we react. I think in higher education, I've learned in my 17 years now working in higher education, a lot of times we're reactive instead of proactive. So we've been hearing about AI for so long and what it can do and how it can enhance us, but now it's like at a point where we're building policies now and thinking about processes and how we want to approach AI on our campuses, when we should have been talking about it a long time ago and being more proactive and not reactive. And I think we will be in a better position on our campuses to build on AI and help it to build on what we're doing to serve our students. I think about another thing that I thought about this with like technology, like thinking about, not trying to date myself, but thinking about when we use floppy disk to save information. We went from floppy disks to jump drives, and from jump drives to external hard drives. And now everything is in the cloud. You can access it anywhere. So when I think about that, I think we have to take that same approach when we think about AI, view that in that same light and on our institutions. So not thinking about the negative and the things where students can put in something and it will come up with a statement of purpose for them. But think about the positive impacts and the immense potential that it can bring to the entire enrollment funnel from prospect to alumni.
I like that. Sort of, working with the tool, because I mean, I think at this point, at least in our student success reporting with respect to AI in higher ed, and when we're thinking about the shift from sort of individual use case to enterprise approaches within an institution, I mean, I think we're there is a growing consensus that it is here to stay, right? And so how do we best most effectively work with it versus against it?
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. And Joe, I wanted to bring you in now and sort of ask, going back to the intro and sort of Ben's overview. So the report finds that AI really isn't being used at scale by enrollment management teams yet. Again, framing it as something of an undertapped resource. So in your view, as someone who's looking at this and working with this, what does the AI and enrollment management landscape look like at present? What capabilities exist? How are teams using it, and to what extent?
Yeah, I think like any new emerging technology, there's a curve, an adoption curve, right? You have early adopters and you have folks who then tend to trail behind. And I think that's true within institutions and across higher education institutions as well. Within institutions, I think you have champions who feel very comfortable with new technology, who tend to be those individuals who are willing to dive right in and begin to experiment how AI can impact their work. And then there are others who still may hesitate to jump into the unknown, especially as AI is evolving so rapidly. But I think we're hearing almost now on a daily basis, and I saw an Inside a higher ed article about an institution using a very innovative way of using AI in advancement, not in enrollment management, but it's an excellent example. And so there are, I think, emerging examples of whole-scale adoption within institutions, even if there are, varying levels of use across employees within an institution. I think a lot of that has to do with governance and how institutions are guiding the way in which enrollment professionals, but higher education professionals more broadly utilize AI within their work. I think institutions have really place more attention on academic integrity and AI use in the academic aspects of higher education as opposed to the administrative aspects. With that, of course, I do think there's plenty of opportunity. The report covers it well about the need for governance, for guiding principles that align with institutional values and an institution's mission that govern use. And when that is in place, I think then you will see greater adoption and whole-scale utilization of AI across a university or a college.
Great. And then Ben, in his comments, he said that one of the most exciting, elements of reporting for him was hearing about the potential, future for AI in enrollment management, future possibilities. And I'm wondering what you see there. What possibilities are you most excited about? Are you imagining are potentially most likely to come to fruition in widespread use?
Yeah, I think there's so many exciting avenues. It's almost like the internet, right? In a lot of ways, right? What are the possibilities? Well, they're almost infinite, but, some maybe more tangible or practical examples. Students now are looking for information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. As you mentioned in your introduction, Colleen, chatbots and virtual assistants are maybe some of the more common utilizations of AI. But I also think integrating those kinds of virtual assistants and on-demand information into the regular course of processes, not only for employees, but for prospective students. So even as they are interacting with the stages of a process, that virtual assistant, that customized information that is available to students on demand, whether it is on a holiday and our offices may be closed, but students are still utilizing our technologies to be able to accomplish what it is that they're trying to accomplish, for example, applying to college. And that information then is available, but is also highly personalized and customized based on the student's interests, needs, whatever it is that the student may be seeking at that juncture of their process, recognizing also their interests and their needs evolve as they're making a decision, right? So what a student may need at the very beginning stage of just becoming aware of an institution and what it offers may be very different than what they may be seeking once they're admitted and they have the opportunity to make a decision about enrollment. So that highly personalized experience. And then I know we'll talk about predictive analytics, but there, as you mentioned, so much data about our students. And with those data come not only opportunities for customization and personalization at scale, but opportunities to be able to make decisions as an institution that are increasingly accurate and precise, which gives us many opportunities to not only meet enrollment goals, but to also ensure financial viability for our institutions during a time when so many higher ed institutions are worried about their financial viability.
Right. And then Claire, thanks again for joining us on the fly. And I'd love to bring you in on this question. Anything to add here about what are some of the most promising or effective AI use cases in enrollment management that you're seeing in your work currently? And then maybe what you imagine for the future?
Yeah, I'm happy to be here, Colleen. Thank you. So in my work with institutions, enrollment management actually stands out as the area where AI adoption is most prevalent and widespread in comparison to their colleagues, possibly in student affairs and even academic affairs. And what's particularly interesting is that enrollment management professionals aren't just using single solutions or the solutions that we hear the most about, like the ChatGPTs and the Geminis. They're implementing multiple tools to create impact across things like their CRM platforms, recruiting functions, financial aid, communication campaigns, student onboarding, and then more broadly to retention and completion initiatives. They're also tailoring their work to graduate students, undergraduate, international first gen, alumni, and other student populations or at key moments in the student journey. So summer melt is a great example, or fee payment, or FAFSA renewal. I just recently published a report with NASPA that highlights 14 emerging use cases and 50 forecasted use cases. And many of them, although broadly student affairs, really kind of straddle into enrollment management. And there's some really compelling examples out there of interesting things that institutions are grappling with, and then really great ideas that they've had. So Colleen, I'd love to share a couple of examples if I can. So UC Berkeley and Mission College are two institutions among a long list of institutions that have implemented a product called OA Tutor. It's actually open source, a free product that institutions can adopt over an MIT license. And it's specifically working with students in math and chemistry, which are two major areas of student success. Furman University has adopted a well-being coach. It is a chatbot, but it focuses very differently than some of the maybe mental health focused chatbots that are out there. It's more around relationships, helping students thrive, create a sense of belonging, and also it integrates into their student engagement platform. Virginia Commonwealth University has an initiative called Climate Text, where they are sending out text messages and getting information from students, all AI powered, to be able to do what they call listening at scale. Maryville University has an innovative transcript evaluation tool, and the registrars around the nation right now are cheering because that's an area that takes up so much time and effort and is so manual. And then finally, Ivy Tech has a really interesting predictive analytics system where they're able to identify students at risk of failing a course in week 2, which if you do work in enrollment management, you know that's a very lofty time, a very difficult time to be able to pull predictive analytics. So just looking at some of those examples, there's some really interesting things happening out there. The challenge, though, is no one thinks they're doing interesting work. Everyone thinks they're behind. So when I put a call out and I say, who's doing advanced work or emerging use cases, or who has an interesting use case, everyone thinks they're behind and no one raises their hand. And then when I finally say things like, well, who's doing anything with AI? A bunch of people raise their hands and say, but it's not unique and it's not special. And in reality, folks, it is. And so much of what's happening out there, other institutions could borrow from, either from within higher ed or outside of higher ed.
Well, that's fantastic and very helpful, concrete examples. And I like you creating a bridge between enrollment management and student affairs, because as you point out, so much of this and the potential for this overlaps between those two.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And of course, student success as well. So Joe, I think that this was a great setup for a question that I wanted to ask you, helping us parse a little bit predictive versus generative AI applications in enrollment management, especially but not exclusively with respect to how data readiness factors in. So what do teams need to know about Gen AI versus predictive AI? And then relatedly, what do they have to do with their data to make sure that they're getting accurate, effective insights for students?
Yeah, thank you so much, Colleen. I recall in Ben's report using the analogy that predictive AI is essentially setting the course that a ship, let's say, in the sea is sailing, and generative AI can be that fuel to help you get there. And what I mean by that is essentially we, again, have so much data about students, but yet sometimes we make more decisions as institutions based on prior observation and anecdotes than we do by historic data. And so predictive analytics is a way of utilizing those historic data points that we have collected on students and over time, and then look for those inferences and patterns and trends within the data points to be able to predict future outcomes. So really thinking about, for example, student characteristics or certain behaviors that a student may exhibit, like visiting our campus or sending an email to the admissions office, can then be just a single data point among many data points that can be used in a predictive model to determine the propensity for that student to enroll if they're offered admission. And that then helps institutions craft an incoming class, but also to make important decisions like how much tuition discount to be able to offer a student, recognizing that there's not unlimited potential to discount tuition in order to sustain enough, to generate enough revenue to be a sustainable institution financially. Generative AI is, again, that power to get you there, because that personalization, the information that may be available to students, will then help the institution meet the goals that are established through predictive modeling. And so I see those different types of AI working in harmony to be able to help an institution not only establish its goals, but attain them as well. And then regarding data and data integrity, most of the data that we encounter in higher education, and certainly in admissions and enrollment management, originate from humans. And with that, there is implicit bias. There are limitations to the data that we have available to us that originate from us as imperfect human beings, right? And so we have to be very careful that AI doesn't amplify or reflect or replicate the biases within the data and then just simply scaling it, which can be harmful and lead to decisions that an institution may not necessarily want to make, particularly from an ethical and equitable perspective. The other, piece is expertise. Right? There has to be requisite expertise for individuals who understand the models that are being developed through AI, understand the inferences that AI can generate within the data, and then interpret those outputs to be able to translate those outputs into actionable decisions and align those decisions with strategic objectives of the institution. I also can just use a very quick example, and that is missing data. So sometimes we have data for students, and in some cases we may not have data for all of our students. And a key question is, are those data missing at random, or is there a systemic reason why the data may be missing? And that can then lead to faulty conclusions when an AI predictive model is run against that data set, just as an example.
That's great. I think that was a really helpful overview. If you don't mind, I was wondering if we could just circle back to tuition discounting for a second, just to flesh this out a little bit. I'm curious, how, if you don't mind on the spot, how tuition discounting, how institutions, historically, still in many cases, typically are making that kind of estimate, trying to find that sweet spot, and then how AI can really assist there to get a more potentially accurate the effective number.
Yeah, so it's not to suggest that institutions aren't already using sophisticated models to be able to predict student enrollment and then also to develop tuition discounting strategies. But what is often used traditionally are data points that we know. So for example, we have these known variables in the data set that we believe may have an impact on a student's enrollment. And we are rarely dumping all that we know about a student into a model, because until AI, that would have been very difficult to determine if there's anything there, and oftentimes actually lead to some statistical problems like multilinearity, like a student's GPA and their science course grades are highly correlated, right? Because the science grade and their GPA actually have to do with one another. And so that can be statistically problematic. AI can begin actually understanding the patterns within the patterns, or the relationships between many different variables, whether we believe there's any impact on the likelihood of a student's enrollment or not. And that then can lead to very helpful predictions about how tuition discounting can be used in conjunction with all that we know about a student. Geographic distance is one of my favorites, right? That on average, a student who resides closer to the institution where they've been admitted is more likely to enroll. And yet, what then does a tuition discount do to that equation, to that prediction? Let alone all the other aspects of data that we may know about the student, their major, their grades, their interests, how they've engaged with the institution during the admissions process. And we have those data within customer relationship management systems. So we can now, with AI, use many more variables than what we've traditionally typically used in predictions to make more precise and accurate decisions. Also then leveraging many more years of historic data as well.
Okay. So more history, more data points, or history potentially about the individual student. And I like the idea of finding patterns within patterns.
Yes.
I think I'll take that with me for future thinking about AI. And then Claire, I wanted to ask you what you would say about AI efforts in enrollment management and their implications for data readiness, just because that's something that we hear so much about with respect to AI across applications in higher ed. And how much work do enrollment management teams have to do on this front, to be on the data front, to be AI ready?
I think many institutions are excited about AI's potential, but the reality is that significant groundwork is going to need to be done to their data infrastructure first. But I think it dovetails nicely with the idea that institutions are always asking me, what can we be doing to get ready? And I think this is the number one thing they can be doing. So the core challenge isn't just having the data, it's having relatively clean, organized, and accessible data. And I would argue that the accessibility piece is actually one of the more challenging ones. How much data exists in disparate, disconnected systems, exists in cloud folders that aren't talking to each other, that are very departmental focused. So enrollment management teams typically need to focus on 3 areas. The first is data quality and integration. So you likely have data scattered across multiple systems. You need to establish a standardized data collection and entry protocol, and you need to have some integration between your systems. The second piece is data governance and security. To have some clear policies to really discuss things like data access, sharing, and usage. And you need to be doing regular audits of data accuracy and completeness. And then finally, data literacy and analysis capabilities. This often exists in one office on a campus or at a university. And I would argue these are skills that are needed across all levels and across all areas of our institutions. So staff need training to understand data structures and relationships. They need to know how to ask the right questions to find those patterns and patterns. They need to develop skills in data preparation and also in basic analysis, because strong data infrastructure improves all aspects of enrollment management. So my best advice to institutions is to start with some basic AI literacy training, conduct a data audit, and determine an AI lead. So understand where you are before planning where you're going. The foundation you build now will honestly determine what's possible with AI, and it will help you be more nimble as these technologies advance and evolve in the coming months. We don't even know what questions to ask yet, but that is coming. And so getting your data ready and having your infrastructure strong will allow you to be more nimble when those technological advancements happen.
So sort of per all of those points, but especially the last one on AI literacy. If you could just dig into that a little bit more, maybe even potentially with some practical sort of first steps,
Sure.
About what teams looking to add AI to their toolbox, how they can build staff buy-in and especially AI literacy.
So I think that we're at a critical inflection point. I think we've all heard what AI is. There's been some basic conversations at many institutions, but very few institutions have really invested in AI literacy. So for me, being able to build AI literacy skills and engender staff buy-in are obviously so important to this work. I recommend approaching it like you did any other successful technology implementation. Go way back to the calculator in math classes, or just recently to going fully online at the onset of the pandemic. You had open dialogue, an interdisciplinary approach, a laser focus on student success, and you use systematic planning. So those things, open dialogue, interdisciplinary approach, laser focus, and systematic planning. So start by creating a space for honest conversations. I traveled to a lot of campuses, and it's the first time that folks have kind of opened up the floor to say, but I'm concerned about the environmental impact. I'm concerned about the loss of jobs. I'm concerned about cybersecurity or student privacy or consent. And just giving folks space to voice their concerns and ask the questions, you'll often hear in the questions and in the discussion where they're lacking in AI literacy, where they don't actually understand oftentimes how the tools are harvesting the information they are. So what knowledge gaps do you need to fill to make informed decisions? That should come from that discussion. What ethical boundaries need to be established? How can you keep communication lines open? And I think you start with some real small, low stakes experiments, right? So give folks space to experience AI tools firsthand through guided exercises, not just, hey, this message of go play, but guided exercises. Document their discoveries, document their questions and concerns, share your experiences broadly in team discussions, and then identify potential use cases that are relevant to your work, knowing that they may not come from your particular area. Student activities may pull from advising and vice versa. And the key is to remove the pressure of immediate implementation. Think of this as your time for an AI sandbox, a place to explore and learn and make mistakes, and it helps build confidence and natural curiosity. We're not going to become AI experts overnight. We're not going to learn computer science language overnight, but it's really this time to develop enough familiarity and comfort that we can make informed decisions and know how these tools might benefit our work.
Got it. Just underscoring the sandbox message, but with a guide in there to help everyone understand. And right. And just, a lot of what you're saying echoes back to some of the steps that Ben sort of synthesized in his report. Start with communication. This is not something to be done under pressure either. I appreciate all of that context. And Naranda, I wanted to sort of give you the floor to, potentially bring together some threads that you've maybe heard throughout the conversation. So just generally anything to add here about building AI literacy and enrollment management, data readiness, things that institutions should be thinking about, privacy concerns, et cetera. What should we go out on before we move on to audience questions?
Yeah, I think Claire summed up a lot of it. I've learned a lot just from listening here today, just thinking about it. I think probably one of the biggest things is be open to the possibilities. I mean, there's so much that AI can do for us on our campuses, and I think we should just be open to it. Of course, prepare and plan for the inevitable things that may happen, abuse that may happen in those sort of things, but tap into the positives that can allow us as higher education professionals to do better, be better, providing excellent customer service, our higher quality education to our students, as well as supporting our faculties and our staffs on our campuses. When we think about, we have to support the students that we serve daily. You can't teach if you're not taught. So being able to tap into that and learning AI, just like Claire just said, just like learning it, getting that literacy, finding a league, doing guided exercises. One of the notes that I wrote was like, you have to step outside of your box, realize that AI is a resource and not a barrier. Don't view it as a barrier. Start small, talk to your colleagues on your campus, tap into your resources to your colleagues at peer institutions or other institutions, because so much great work is being done around AI. I mean, even when I was asked to be on this, I told Colleen, I'm like, I'm no expert in AI. Like, I'm still trying to figure things out and just learning the different parts of AI, the different perspectives of it. So being able to make sure that you're investing that time to seek the avenue that works best for your department. What may be happening at Delaware Valley University may not work at Georgia Southern University, but some aspects of what Joe's doing on his campus could help at my institution. So being able to use your resources and tap into your colleagues across campuses, start small. Like I said, don't put a time limit on when you want to do it. Don't put yourself under that pressure that Colleen said, but realize that if we're going to advance and continue to grow enrollment on our campuses, especially in the graduate realm. Like, there's so much focus on graduate students on a lot of our campus now because of that looming enrollment cliff. Why not use something that's going to help us and better prepare us to serve our students?
Right. I think your position and your sort of background on AI is very representative of probably where many in the field are at. So that's excellent. And I think your openness to it and your curiosity about it is probably inspiring to a lot of people watching. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I wanted to move on to audience questions. And Narana, I wanted to stick with you to the extent that you feel comfortable answering this, and we can punt to other members of the panel if necessary. But because you are in the graduate space, but you are, president of a major organization in enrollment management generally, someone asks, will you discuss the undergrad versus grad applications of AI in the enrollment process? I'm wondering, just maybe top level, what are some key differences that you see in applications here?
Never worked on undergraduate side, so I'll during graduate my entire time in higher education, but just realizing like the application process is much different. Like on our campuses, we've had conversations about whether we could automate some graduate admissions processes or automate admitting graduate students on the level that we do undergrad students. And I always say that we're on two different islands from undergrad to grad. So some things that may work on the undergrad side may not work on the graduate side, but you can learn from each. There are some things that you could possibly automate. You could set some processes in place using AI tools that can help you better that process for that admissions process with the automating undergrad side or graduate side. There's so many aspects, different things within a department or a college on your campus. You can have different admissions requirements. So trying to figure out what works best for undergrad or grad is definitely different, but there are tools that can help you with both.
Right, and I think that's helpful too. And it's just a reminder, to me that I think going back to one of the points that you've made, that it's going to, AI applications are going to look different, not just at the graduate versus undergraduate level, but at different institutions. So it really is something that institutions will have to right size for their own needs, beyond graduate versus undergraduate. But I did see, Joe, you nodding your head here. I was wondering if there's anything to add or kind of share with the audience about undergrad applications versus AI and enrollment, versus graduate and enrollment management.
Yeah, I've worked in both undergrad and graduate admissions. I'm currently a dean of a School of Graduate and Professional Studies. And so what I also think is an important consideration is that graduate enrollment management tends to be a far more decentralized structure than undergraduate admissions. Far more often, you'll have a centralized undergraduate admissions office serving the entire institution, whereas often graduate admissions work, for example, the evaluation of admissions applicants, often happens within an academic department or with even sometimes within an academic program that is situated within an academic department within an academic school or college. And so that decentralized nature of graduate enrollment management actually lends itself quite well to AI, because what you end up oftentimes seeing, to Naranda's earlier point, is a bifurcation of resources. So when you're just looking at one academic program, you may not have a single individual with admissions experience, let alone AI experience, who is now tasked with evaluating an admissions application and maybe tasked with meeting enrollment goals for that program or academic department. And so AI actually allows for that efficiency in ways that an individual who may have deep content knowledge in an academic discipline, but who has never worked in admissions a day in their life until they're a department chair or a program director, and now they find themselves with those responsibilities, to be able to have a resource that they otherwise may not have. And that could be how to respond to prospective student inquiries, how to, for example, gain some efficiency in terms of the application review process. And then even I think about some of the objective types of information that someone without admissions experience may struggle to derive from the application components, like how do I factor course grades or GPA into the decision-making process. I do think AI can at least help gain some efficiency there in deriving some information that individual or committee of individuals can then use to make decisions.
Mm-hmm. Claire, I was wondering if you had anything to share here, and maybe even potentially, Ben, just anything in your reporting that came up for you, thinking about and talking to undergraduate versus graduate enrollment management leaders. And maybe we'll start with Claire.
I think that the real value in so many of these tools is that we can really tailor our messaging our communication campaigns, everything we do towards specific populations, but we need to train them well to do that, right? If we say to them, talk to a new student, they don't understand that we're talking about an undergraduate student who's maybe traditionally aged versus a dual enrollment student versus a graduate student. So for me, it's about us training the tools well, but also really getting out of our silos, right? There's much of what's happening in undergraduate admissions that is not that different than what's happening in graduate admissions, but there are some key important differences. And the message that goes to that 18-year-old, you send that same message to a prospective doctoral student, we're going to be in trouble, right? But I think a key piece around AI literacy, in particular for our graduate students, is what happens once they're enrolled and really helping them to understand the high price of not having really robust and nuanced AI literacy. So those two pieces are really important to me as we think about graduate students.
Okay, so lots of overlap that you highlight, especially with respect to AI literacy needs. Ben, how does that check out potentially with some of your reporting?
I think not really much to add to what everyone else has said, aside from the fact that, these are two very different populations with very different kind of processes for admission and enrollment. But there's obviously potential there for the two to kind of learn from each other, particularly in terms of process.
Right. And I think that goes back to the, interdisciplinarity or maybe interdepartmentality of this work that I think that has been referenced and advised several times already. Here's an interesting question. How is AI supporting equity and supporting efforts around college affordability? And Joe, I saw you nodding first, so I'm going to go to you first on this one.
You need to stop nodding. No, I'm glad to tackle this one. I think first and foremost, like the need for AI literacy, there's also a need for financial literacy. And that's particularly true among, many different student populations, but one key population that I think institutions are really grappling with how best to serve are adult learners and individuals who have not maybe been enrolled in formal education for many years, but are going to become an increasingly important stakeholder as we see demographic shifts throughout the United States. The obvious answer would have been first generation students as well, certainly, but also our adult learner population. And so financial literacy can actually be promoted by making more information readily available and again, more customized and personalized to that individual student based on what we know about them and about the kinds of questions that they may be seeking answers to. And so to me, again, our offices still, I think, throughout most of the country operate on a pretty traditional standard business day. And yet adult learners may not have a single minute of available time to be able to ask a question to a real human, yet they're seeking answers to those really important questions to guide their next steps. And so AI can actually become a very important tool like chatbots, knowledge bases, but also the proactive communication that we share out with our students, powered by AI via CRM systems that really customize that journey for students. So to me, accessibility to information about affordability of college, about college costs, about the processes associated with applying for financial aid, applying for other sources of aid outside of federal aid, applying through whatever university processes may exist that ensure a student is considered for institutional aid, can be guided and personalized, powered by AI tools.
Naranda, I'd love to let you give you an opportunity potentially to weigh in on that one question. And I also want to send something very thorny your way, and apologies in advance. But we have here, I would be curious to hear your thoughts on some of the pluses and minuses of using AI to interpret data as part of the admissions decision-making process. For example, what about its effect on not only efficiency, but also the transparency of the decision-making process and implications that it may have for fairness and equity in the admissions process and for exposing or protected institutions from lawsuits? And a lot of this is, future philosophical, legal stuff, TBD. But, I guess what stuck out to me about this question is questions about transparency. And I'm just wondering what's your line of thinking on that so far?
Yeah, I think when you think about admissions and AI, using that, like I said earlier, we're looking at the possibility of being able to do blanket admission process or auto admission for some of our grant programs. But when I think about the data, you get what you put in. So you're thinking about AI, you're thinking about the data that you want to collect and what you want to use, what parameters you're setting in there in order to review an application and determine whether this person is admissible or not. For me, I think it takes out that implicit bias from a person that's actually reviewing that application, where you're putting in the parameters into AI, what you want to get out, what you're looking for to admit a student in that program. So I think it's great to think about that and to think about how you can use AI to do that process instead of having humans look at an application or look at something that a student is doing that they've done in their undergraduate program, was reviewing the transcript, reviewing the resume, and different things like that. When you're plugging in those parameters, you're getting out what you're looking for versus putting that on somebody to actually look at. And I think the transparency part of that is actually being transparent about where you're doing, what you're looking for when you're using AI to make these decisions, just being open and sharing that information. Because a lot of times, like I said, in the grad world, Joe shared earlier, there could be centralized admission, there could be decentralized admissions, and it could be a mixture of the two on our campuses. So you have somebody that's never looked at an application, and all of a sudden they're the program director for a grad program, and they're determining the admissibility of a student. Like, they have no idea kind of when they're looking at an application, like what they're looking at, because some of them have looked at a graduate application before. What we're asking at the graduate admissions office for admission to our graduate program, if there are certain specifics that a grad program, this grad program may want a resume, this grad program may not. You just have a certain GPA. So I think it takes a lot of the uncertainty out of that. So I think it's a great thing that we could use and definitely need to explore more in graduate education or in admissions overall, whether it's grad or undergrad.
Okay, well, thank you for tackling that question. And I think I'm so glad that someone asked it and that you took it, because it's a key point that we are right to be concerned about the potential for, biases and replicated biases in these processes. And that raises all kinds of questions about transparency and equity. However, there is also the potential with these tools to make things less biased and more objective and transparent. And I think maybe the last question here that maybe I'll throw at Claire, if you don't mind. Another thorny one is someone is interested in learning about how AI, and I think we alluded to it a little bit in the intro, and there's some information in the report, how it's able to assist with the transfer evaluation process, which we know is such a barrier for so many students, very complicated in too many cases. We all come across the issue of time management. So turnaround time is critical for students who want to know if or how many credits could potentially come over to our institution. So beyond, admission, it's almost like this surface level evaluation. Almost, is it worth the time on the student's part to think about applying? Claire, how would you answer that question in the 60 seconds we have left?
I would answer it now, and then I would answer it what's coming. So right now, there are vendor tools that are out there. I mentioned Maryville University is one of many that's using a vendor tool. Those tools require massive data sets, and that's the real challenge. So what's going to be happening, and what I'm seeing happening in California and Texas and New York and other states, is that they're really harnessing their massive size to do a lot of this work around transfer evaluation, around transfer mapping, transfer articulation, and then on the ground, that transcript evaluator who gets handed a transcript, moving from something taking hours to something taking minutes. Wow. With human check-ins along the way, obviously. I think that's going to revolutionize the work that's happening in admissions. I think it's going to give our transfer students much more informed decision-making abilities. It's going to also show a lot of the cracks and problems that we have in many of our transfer processes across the country. And so I would really encourage folks that are feeling a little down in this area. It's probably the one I get asked about the most when I'm visiting campus, is that there are currently products that are very good, but they tend to be more expensive. But there are more open source and more state-led programs coming that could be emulated by other entities very soon. So part of that is cleaning up your data, cleaning up your processes, and understanding and making sure it exists in the minds of certain registrars and certain advisors. Really getting that information on paper, I think, is going to be really important to many institutions to prepare for this next iteration.
Fantastic. And again, kind of going back to ideas about data readiness and so many themes and threads that we've already touched on and woven through this hour, which has flown by. I want to thank you all so much. I've really appreciated your insights. I know I'll be taking them away in my future thinking and reporting about AI in 2025. So I'd just like to thank you all again, Claire, Joe, Naranda, Ben, for writing the report for us. Thank you so much. That's available on our website, and you'll all get a copy of that, I think, shortly within 24 hours, along with this recording. Thanks to Jessica behind the scenes. Thank you to all of you in the audience, and thanks to Liaison for helping us have this conversation. Have a wonderful afternoon, and we will see you next time.
Liaison is a higher education technology company that helps over 1,200 campuses achieve enrollment and student success goals. Its solutions include the centralized application service, AI tools, enrollment marketing, and advanced CRM and analytics. By offering innovative, data-driven products, Liaison empowers colleges and universities to build ideal student cohorts and meet their enrollment targets. Liaison, connecting ambition to achievement.